All right, so President Cyril Ramaphosa expected to address us at about 8 o'clock on how the government is responding to the flare-up of COVID-19 infections. Some speculation about new regulations to curb the spread going into this festive season. The address follows a special sitting of cabinet that considered the recommendations of the National Coronavirus Command Council. For more on what we can possibly expect, let's cross to SABC News' political editor Mzwandile Mbeje. What are we possibly looking at tonight?
Well, a very good evening to you, Francis, and the viewers. And of course, we are not used to having the president speak to us so early in the month. So that does suggest that there is a message that he needs to send out there to the people of South Africa. So ordinarily, Francis, it would happen perhaps around mid-month. That's when the national state of disaster has to be extended, because remember, it's on a month-to-month basis. But the fact that the president has chosen to speak to us at the beginning of December, and remember, December is basically a festive month. That's when many people go to holidays. That's when many people gather. That's when many people really have a nice time. But the fact of the matter is that we are seeing, as you have pointed out in your intro there, a flare-up of these coronavirus cases. So I think the reason why the president is going to speak to us is basically to warn us to say, if we continue in this trajectory, it's going to be very, very difficult. And then particularly areas that are mostly affected in this instance, that would be your Western Cape and Eastern Cape, and in the Eastern Cape particularly Port Elizabeth, Francis.
But he has to balance the economic concerns, those tourism hotspots, those small businesses that have just been allowed to open and are desperate for holidaymakers to come and ensure their survival. In fact, Mzwai, there were some reports earlier this week about a possible 10 p.m. curfew, about restrictions on alcohol sales down to 4 days a week, taverns possibly closing at about 9 o'clock. Do we know any of those details yet?
Well, those details are expected to be unveiled today. And those discussions, Francis, flow from the meeting that the president and his command council had on Tuesday. So there were a number of suggestions there to say, as you have correctly said, at the end of the day, we still have to protect livelihoods, but also you need to save lives. So how do you balance it? Given that the evidence on the ground is that the cases are starting to increase. So what is it? Is the government going to simply sit and say, well, we don't want to interfere with the economy, so they can't do that? So maybe you will see a localized a way of doing things, perhaps in areas where these cases are flaring up. So you may have localized restrictions. You may not necessarily subject an area which has really well behaved to an area which is really not behaving. So you are likely to see certain restrictions imposed in other areas, particularly the issue around alcohol. And it's been really seen as one of the main contributors, because when people are having a nice time, they forget about those basics of wearing masks, of social distancing, and of course of washing hands. So you are likely, Francis, to see in certain areas restrictions being imposed, and the curfews perhaps do come in other areas, but it's really not expected to be a nationwide issue. But also here is the issue, the thing. Given that we are going into a holiday season, so many people travel to various parts of the country. So how are you going to manage that? It's going to be very interesting to listen to what the president will exactly be saying in this regard, Francis.
All right, thank you very much. Politics editor Mzwandile Mbeje ahead of the president's address at 8 o'clock tonight.